and then action items for the development charter stakeholder.
Can everyone see the screen good? Okay.
Okay. So with the information updates, at the last meeting, there was a request for an airport land needs report to be circulated. So Guy Paparella had that circulated through Jasmine to the committee. In terms of parking structures, there was a request for the rationale for why those are exempted under the current development charges for both parking structures and parking lots. So I've done a little bit of digging. Going back to 2004 was the last time this seems to have been looked at that point in time. That report from 2004 didn't have a lot of background or rationale provided to it. At that time, the Home Builders Association, I think, had said that they were in favor of charging for the roads and storm portion. One of the citizen members suggested that they should be charged DCs. Ultimately, no DCs were charged. We looked at other municipalities. There are no other municipalities we could find that do charge for parking structures. On the residential parking structure side, residential uses are charged development charges based on residential units using our current DC methodology. So as such, if we were to charge a parking structure that was a residential use, there could be an inequity seen if we were charging for parking structures on apartments and condos, but not on garages and low density or medium density homes such as single attached or townhomes. For non-residential parking structures, what we felt was that generally they're part of a larger development. Niagara and Ottawa are the types of municipalities that would have parking structures, and I wasn't able to come across any that do charge for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this?
Yeah.
Patty?
From the research you did, Adam, can you give us an idea of how the other municipalities charge for these parking structures?
Adam?
Through the chair, what I found was that most of they refer to them as being exempt in their bylaws.
Okay. Because from my experience, most of these parking structures are done in, let's say, the downtown area, and that's where they give downtown businesses an exemption from the parking requirements, but they take some money as cash in lieu and put it towards the general pool, and then the municipality goes and builds a parking structure. And they're using that money, and that's different from putting it in the DC and spreading it across the whole city. That sort of works in the rationale you gave about why it should be exempt, but that is collected separately. I don't know what the city of Hamilton does. Does anybody know what the city of Hamilton does for their parking structure?
Mr. Spiler?
Chair, no.
Nope.
You don't have parking structures.
We have one.
We inherited it,
Yeah.
I recall.
Councilor Pearson indicates that we inherited the structure.
Inherited it.
Yeah.
It has been a problem.
Anyway, that's our experience, so leave it at that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, right. Just under the exemption bylaw, I'm presuming that would be the rationale is to keep cars off the street. Would this be a substantive rationale for not charging for underground structures? Keep cars off the street? Would that be...
Through the chair, I don't believe, I would look to planning or engineering to provide information on what those types of requirements would be. But in terms of just the methodology for how the charge is calculated, on residential, it's based on a residential unit charge. And so we would have to change the basis of how we charge residential in order to capture the residential portion of parking structures. I would say the parking structures are going to reduce the number of street level parking spots that you're required, whether that's at a parking lot or on-street parking.
You also stated demand, I think, by hotels and other commercial driven by needs, by needs.
Yep. have to speak up a little bit louder so that.
Oh, you have your demand, say for hotels or non-residential uses are driven by needs. Would that be the needs per unit in the hotel? Or can you put a little bit of a qualifier to that?
So through the chair, what I was trying to get at is that the need on the services, so whether that's the parking structure itself, the roads to get there, water, wastewater, stormwater, the needs is really driven by the development of the non-residential use rather than the parking structure itself. The parking structure doesn't drive the need for the vehicles. The need for the parking structure is driven by the development, which needs parking.
Which would be included in some kind of needs assessment of this.
Mhm.
Okay. The other thing is, I don't believe parking lots were specifically addressed. I mean, in terms of the, is there any kind of separation in terms of a lot as opposed to a structure underground or?
Through the chair, actually, that was the last point I was going to get to after the parking structures. But yeah, so
You're psychic.
yeah, so street level parking lots. The issue with them is we don't have an ability to charge based on the current definitions we use in the bylaw because there is no gross floor area. There's no walls and roof, therefore there's no gross floor area based on the definitions that we use in our bylaw. So there's no basis currently to charge, to collect development charges. If we were to go and want to charge them, again, we would have to look at changing the basis for which we collect charges, and whether that's for specific components or all components.
So to be clear, you could not find the rationale for the original exemption in the documents?
Through the chair, back in 2004, there was no explanation or rationale given. It was just the recommendation and which stakeholders were in favor or not of that recommendation.
Okay. Any other questions? Let's move on then.
And the final information update I want to provide is that we have now an active link for the development charge study, which we've so far posted the 2 presentations from the previous meetings. This is the webpage where we will be posting the background study and draft bylaws by May 6th so that they're available for the public at least 14 days prior to the public meeting on May 21st. And so this web-friendly address will be included in the newspaper advertisements as well.
Thank you.
So the residential development charge update. Back in March 31st, the numbers that were presented was $35,670 for a single detached unit. The draft numbers that we are sitting at now is $35,808 per unit. So an increase since March 31st of $138. This increase has been driven by some changes to the water and linear wastewater services, and then brought back by a bit of a decrease in services related to a highway. So when I get onto the next 2 slides, we'll be able to see which services have changed and how much they've changed. So like I said, there's changes to the water and wastewater service components. You'll see those on slide 7. The reason for the change is using a more updated version of our costing spreadsheet. So the costing spreadsheet that was used in the March 31st was actually from December, and when we used the updated one from March, that staff had gone through and reviewed and updated projects that had been funded or that needed to be added. We came up with some new costs. The Home Builders Association has requested some changes or projects to be reviewed for the water and linear wastewater projects. Staff are in the process of reviewing those projects, so there hasn't been any changes made as a result of those discussions with the Home Builders Association so far. For services related to a highway, we had a reduction in the quantum as a result of the Home Builders Association asking staff to review a number of projects and reconsider the growth versus benefit to existing and project types. The Home Builders Association also requested one project to be added, which has been included in the revised calculations. We have some updated project listings. Again, these could change over the next couple days as we review some of the projects that the Home Builders Association has asked us to review. We've advised the Home Builders Association that at the end of the day today is the adjustment or the deadline for any projects that they want us to review for making adjustments to, as we have some tight deadlines to get the report published and ready to go on May 6th. So to the quantum itself, looking at it by service, so on the municipal-wide services, everything other than the rate services, we had changes to 4 of the services. As I discussed, services related to a highway decreased by $463. This is a result of changing some of the benefit to existing and changing some of the project scopes and then adding one project in at the request of the Home Builders Association. There are some other smaller nominal changes to transit, fire, and library. Those are a result of fine-tuning some of the service standard details and limits of how much we can collect based on the level of service currently provided. For the urban area charges, the stormwater, the wastewater, and the water services, mainly we had the increase as discussed to the linear wastewater and the water services based on more updated project listings and costings. So to get into some of our comparators, updated some of the costs here to reflect changes that may have been made since that comparator group. And then we've included the neighboring municipalities. We've added Mississauga in here, so Mississauga's been requested as a comparator, so we've put it into this table here. So non-residential development charge update. March 31st, we had a rate of $19.65 per square foot. The April 23 draft has actually decreased by 20 cents to $19.45 per square foot. Again, the main changes are services related to highway, water, and wastewater. So looking at the service by service basis, the 55-cent decrease to the services related to a highway. Some minor changes to a couple of the other services due to finalizing the service standards that we've provided over the last 10 years, making minor changes. And then on the water and wastewater side, an increase due to some of the updated costs and project listings. Because services related to a highway are a 50% service, where 50% is res and 50% is non-res. And the water and wastewater are 66% res, 34% non-res. We see a decrease on the non-residential side, even though there's an increase on the residential side. So comparing to some of the other municipalities, again, we've updated this for some municipalities that have now provided a draft proposed rate. So Waterloo is now on there. Again, Brantford had a revised figure that they had their council approve last night, which was $6.28 per square foot. London's proposed charges dropped from a little over $30 a square foot down to $24.71. Again, that is still a proposed rate.
So they're all increases, but they had lowered their original projection to a lower amount, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
That's correct. Yeah, London originally, when they came forward with their first staff draft, had over $30 a square foot, they're now down to $24.71 per square foot due to some changes in the assumptions that they've made. Again, comparison with some of our neighboring municipalities. Again, we've added Mississauga into this table to show where we stand in relation to them. Mississauga will also have a new rate that they'll have to do shortly. I believe they're publishing their rate in the next week or two, but they don't have the proposed rate that was available at this time. So that there is their current rate. And the industrial development charge update. Staff met with SMT after the last March 31st stakeholder meeting. When we met with SMT, their recommendation was for us to proceed with using the rationale that was used in 2011 in developing the previous industrial rate, which was to recapture 100% of the linear wastewater treatment plant, and stormwater components, and then a portion of the services related to a highway. So the $11.78 per square foot reflects capturing 100% of those three services and 65% of the services related to a highway charge.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
What is SMT?
senior management
Senior
team.
man,
So that's all of the general managers for the city meeting together under the city manager.
We talk in acronyms all the time, we don't realize, right?
And so as outlined there, it's a $2.80 proposed increase to the industrial charge.
Is this related to the TAC and all?
No, so through the chair, this is not related to the cap. So when we met with SMT, I believe the discussion around that was brought up, and SMT was of the opinion that we should be trying to limit the exemptions as it creates funding issues, and that this was their recommendation and direction for how to proceed was with increasing the charge based on those four components I noted, collecting 100% of the to wastewater, 100% of the stormwater, and as much as we thought we could for the services related to a highway. So here we've shown the chart again, showing the industrial DC increase each year from 99 through to the draft recommended rate of $11.78 per square foot. Just a side note, if you compare this to the chart that was provided at the last meeting, I've removed the education development charges from this because they're outside of council's control, and the two boards of education will be reviewing their charges and coming up with new bylaws at the end of August. So in terms of comparison to other municipalities, we've updated the chart again. So again, Waterloo is a new amount that they've proposed that's been included. And again, Brantford approved the rate of actually $6.28 per square foot, not the $6.43 that was included in the slides. In terms of neighboring municipalities, again, we've included the listing here. We've added Mississauga in, so they are $13.45 per square foot currently.
Hold on a second, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, and I keep seeing $8.98 coming up, and when I go back to our notes from the last meeting, it was $9.60, so where did $8.98 come from?
Adam?
So through the chair, again, this is, as I kind of noted on the last slide, I've gone through and I've removed the education development charges, just to try and make it clear that we're looking at the city development charge, what we can impact, and so this is just the city development charge rate. So there
Okay.
are education development charges,
Sorry, I missed
and
that.
they will be coming up for renewal at the end of August.
So that was with the education tax on it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor
Just
Pearson?
to that, to add in place, Mr. Chairman, are the rates for the other municipalities also reflective of just their charge and not their education DCs?
Through the chair, yes, I've gone through and I've taken out the education DCs anywhere that they had been previously.
Thank you.
So again, yeah, this was the neighboring municipalities. And I think I'll pass it off to Joe now to just kind of go over the exemptions and then get into some of the policy.
Excellent. Any questions for Adam before we move on? Perfect. Joseph?
Okay, through the chair, this, what I'll look at, the next part of the presentation is regarding the impact of development charge exemptions for the years 2012 and 2013. Just as a note, in 2012, there were a number of major industrial developments. And for example, Maple Leaf with almost 500,000 square feet, Navistar at 250, Activation Laboratories at 122,000 square feet, Homewood Suites 66,000 square feet. And so all these industrial developments, because we were using a subsidized rate of $6.65 during the bulk of those developments, these exemptions on the industrial side accounted for 10.1 of the 11.1 million in industrial rate exemptions. And so if you take a look at the bottom of this chart here, the third last line, it says total development charge exemptions. So for 2012, they were 18.5 million, and in 2013, they were 13.9 million. The City of Hamilton, through the water and wastewater budget, we do fund the development charge exemptions related to those services. So in the next line, it says development charges funded from rates budget. So you can see 8.2 million in 2012 and 7.2 million in 2013. So the net impact of the exemptions to the City of Hamilton, the unfunded, in 2012 was 10.2 million, and in 2013 was 6.6 million. Just as a note, for the previous 2 or 3 years prior to 2012, 2013 represented more of a normal development year rather than 2012, where the spate of building permits for industrial developments came in. As Adam had mentioned in his presentation there, we did go to senior management team for the City of Hamilton a couple of weeks ago, and we did take a look at a number of issues, asking them to provide endorsements for some of the development charge issues that came up. And starting with the first one on the city, what they did endorse was citywide municipal charges and the principle of limiting the use of special area charges. This was a recommendation that was approved by council both in the 2004 and 2009 development charge bylaw reports.
Just so that everyone is on the same page. So when the different departments, planning, public works, when they're making recommendations, finance, they make the recommendations to the senior management team, which represents all of those departments in one group. And then in order for it to become a recommendation for council, it has to be endorsed by SMT. So the draft that you have today was endorsed by SMT. So recommendations from the staff present here, flowing up to SMT, and then it will come to council with your input. Go ahead, Joe.
Another endorsement from the senior management team was regarding the industrial development charge rate. And as Adam had showed in the slide previous, that the development charge rate for industrial developments, that it would be set at $11.78 per square foot, effective July 6th of this year. And as he had mentioned, that the charge continue to be calculated based on 100% of the linear wastewater, 100% of the storm, 100% of the wastewater treatment plant, and 65% of the services related to a highway or roads. The next issue that SMT dealt with and endorsed was regarding the development charge exemption in the downtown Hamilton Community Improvement Area, or CIPA. And SMT endorsed that the exemption be reduced from its current level of 90% to 85% starting on July 6, 2015. So the existing 90% exemption would last for a year to give the development community time to adjust to the recommended rate increases. So the 90% would remain for a full year from the July 5th date in 2014 that the existing bylaw expires. And then the exemption would be reduced to 85% in the following year, 80% in the next year, 75%, and then the last year of the bylaw it'd be set at 70%. That would be the exemption amount.
Quick question, please, through you, Chair. On slide 19 and on this slide, it talks about DC exemptions, and on slide 19, it went so far as to the net impact was 6.6 million, and now we're seeing here, thank you. At the end of the day, the reason that this was all done was to encourage development to get taxpayers and to get the Hamilton taxpayers to have some benefit from this. Is there any analysis been done now to suggest how much the taxpayers benefited from all this at the end of the day? What taxes increased? What did we get at the tax levy portion? So we've given the exemptions, they built up their facilities, whatever they may be, and now they're paying a certain tax rate that wasn't being paid prior. So do we have those statistics to go back to the community to say, yes, this is $6.6 million exemption, but this is what we benefit from those exemptions? Do we have that anywhere?
Through the chair, I know that we've provided council with some information with respect to not only additional non-res development, but as well the retention. So as much as we would love to be able to quantify what the benefit is, the challenge is on the retention. So how many non-residential properties were we able to retain because of the competitive tax rate? So there have been some staff reports prepared in the past, and we can share those. They haven't been updated in most recent years, but there have been some reports that have made an effort to quantify what the benefit has been in terms of non-res development, as well as the retention of non-res property holders.
And thank you, and through you, Chair, and I don't mean to put you on the spot today, but it would be interesting to know. We've had old buildings that have been revamped, they're now condos. The old building, abandoned building, paid a certain tax, which was probably next to nothing because it was an old abandoned building. Now it's a condominium and it's now paying the tax base that you were hoping to get. So those are the numbers that I'm hoping to get, because this $6.6 million to the average taxpayer is what the, but if we can quantify that with this is what we've benefited from it, that would be apples to oranges.
And through the chair, there's, I'm sure Economic Development can share some information as it relates to the CPA. Part of the conversation that senior management team was trying to balance maintaining our financial position as well as trying to encourage development, continue to encourage the development we are seeing. So I know there was some information shared with respect to the pace of development in the CPA corridor, as well as the expected development coming forward, and that was part of the rationale for delaying the changes until July 6th, 2015 to provide those who are currently in motion in terms of development time to adjust for the change, but we can share that information as well as it relates to the CPA, as you know, what has been the uptake in that area and what is forecasted in the near future in terms of
Thank you, Mr. Everson.
Just to add to Mr. Scarrick, we can provide you with the construction value for all the development.
Can everyone hear Neil? He has a quiet voice.
Sorry, we can provide you with the construction value for all the development in the community improvement area downtown. And the tax is going to have to catch up because of impact, but we can give you that construction value fairly.
Thank you, because I think that was the big selling feature behind all this. The DC exemptions was to promote this, therefore the taxes would increase and take the ownership off the residential tax. So that's what I would like to see as the measuring tool. How do we know we're successful? How do we know that our tax base is now increased? And that's what I'm asking for, so thank you. And not today, but it would be just great to have that yin-yang thing.
But there were general numbers that were provided in reports about 2 years ago, because the Mayor Patina had asked for them. So we should be able to at least get an update from that, or perhaps recirculate that report quickly and then provide a more direct analysis.
Through the chair, we can provide that information as well as we will share the most recent reassessment information. I think
Right.
the other part of the conversation is the fact that in terms of average increase in reassessment, the wards 1, 2, and 3 exceeded the balance of the wards in the city of Hamilton in terms of the average increase in reassessment. And I believe they were 1.3, 1%, and 0.1% respectively across those 3 wards.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, just to justify that $6.6 million, this is what the taxpayer benefited. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next issue that senior management team dealt with, which was a current issue, was that regarding indoor cannabis farming facilities, that for development charge purposes, they'd be considered industrial. With regards to if they were considered agricultural, there would be no development charges paid. Therefore, if they do set up any new facilities, whether it be in the brownfields or in another area, that for development charge purposes, they would be classified as industrial.
Our greenhouses assessed currently.
Through the chair, currently, the commercial portion of greenhouses are classified as an industrial use, and any greenhouses that are outside of that commercial portion are exempt as an agricultural use.
So is there a potential challenge coming with regards to if the marijuana are assessed as industrial, and then we now end up having agricultural greenhouses assessed as industrial also? Because there's virtually no difference between, and I'm not interested in marijuana, but I'm looking at the process. You grow it, you dry it, you sell it. That's exactly the same process as is being used in the majority of our agriculture. So if you're going to assess cannabis as industrial, why aren't you assessing all of our agriculture as industrial?
I think when we were discussing it, through the chair, I think when we were discussing at S&T, the economics of this particular crop or whatever, I think would be a little bit more lucrative than your average.
We don't make decisions based on economics, we make decisions based on use.
But when we did discuss this particular use, we decided that it would be best to go.
It'll be an interesting discussion to council.
Any comment on that, please?
Absolutely.
In terms of the cannabis, I think I came across something, if you're growing it in ex-urban areas or outside, you're assessing it as agriculture because it doesn't have an impact on the existing infrastructure, is that right?
With
In
regards
terms
to,
of wastewater and water and that kind
it would use water and wastewater services. So depending, like for example, if they do set up in a brownfield area and it's an existing warehouse,
of. Yeah.
it'll go from industrial to industrial, so there would be no charge. This is only comes into effect if they do expand the facilities or if they create a new development.
Okay, within an urban area, like a context, within the general area, urban area of Hamilton. But outside of that, it would still be assessed, it would become assessed agricultural.
No, we would use the industrial.
Given that it wouldn't have the same
Classification.
impacts on the wastewater or water infrastructure.
Adam?
So through the chair, based on the way the bylaws set out, it would only be subject to the services related to a highway portion of the charge if they were outside of the urban area. So the water, wastewater, storm, or well, in this case, it would just be the wastewater and storm because it's industrial development charge, only apply to developments within the urban boundary or that are directly connected to those services. So if it were to occur outside of the urban boundary, it would just be the services related to a highway portion of the charge that would apply. But along those lines, I think it may have been in the, or kind of discussed in the draft report that we provided that when we were looking at it, we thought that the cannabis farming facilities, we called it, were
Cash
more
crop.
close, yeah, were more closely aligned to an industrial development due to where it's located and the type of facility that would be required as opposed to a greenhouse.
As I say, it'll be a fascinating discussion, specifically on the legal part of it. Anyways, you had a question, Councillor? No?
So the next part of the presentation then asks the development charges stakeholders regarding what type of action they want to take with regard to the SMT, the senior management team staff recommendations, dealing with some of them or all of the recommendations, whether they want to endorse them as a whole, as a group, or whether they want to deal with these issues in terms of how previous development charge stakeholder committees and previous bylaws dealt with these issues, in that as an appendix to the staff report that goes to the General Issues Committee, they express their opinions in letters with regards to all of the issues that they were concerned about, and also that the development charges stakeholders, if they have any additional recommendations or actions for staff, for example, with regards to the residential development charges, there could be phase-in periods, which we've done in previous bylaws. With regards to the non-res increase also, so these are the types of actions that staff are asking the development charges stakeholder committee to consider, since this is the last meeting before the GIC on May the 21st. And the next slide is just the remainder of the schedule with regards to the next step in the bylaw process. So on April the 30th, the notice of the public meeting goes out. On May the 6th, the proposed bylaws, the background study are available to the public. On May the 21st, the General Issues Committee meeting, which is and a public meeting also, are done at that time. And there are alternative dates with regards to other issues if they need to be dealt with. June the 4th will be the second GIC. And there are council meetings then on May the 28th and June the 11th to consider any recommendations coming from those meetings. And then July the 6th would be the effective date of our new development charges bylaw.
Okay, should be fun. Okay, open for questions. Councillor Johnson, you can take the chair, and I have a few.
All right, so
Gary, with regards to classification, so we have agricultural, we have industrial, commercial. Industrial, can that be broken down further? Can it be pharmaceutical industrial?
Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chair, or in response to your question, yeah. You can break it down finer. If we're breaking down, and if it's for exemption purposes, that's fine, you need to classify the exemption. If you're doing a calculation, you're breaking it down for calculation purposes, then we really have to get into how to measure the service levels for it. But if you're talking about an exemption, we can work with that. And I was going to say, you have in the exemption category, you as a council have a lot of latitude in that, because you start with, we charge everybody, per se, and then you start to move through to say, in certain instances, this class or this type of development won't be charged or reduced charged.
So I'm looking at the recommendation that SMT is dealing with on the cannabis side, and I have personal concerns about the decision that because it's lucrative, we're going to classify it as industrial, which is not defensible in court. So could it be classified as pharmaceutical? And we could argue, for example, if someone was growing ginseng, which is very popular, and they're drying it and they're then commercializing it as a pharmaceutical, it's the same thing as what cannabis would be done.
Gary?
Growing it, drying it, selling it.
So is it for the purpose of an exemption, you're trying to categorize it differently than?
Not as an exemption. My concern is that my concern is that the agricultural communities are going to find themselves stressed with greenhouses becoming industrial, and they're not industrial. They should be considered agricultural, so we shouldn't be doing anything that could impinge on that. So we're clarifying that this particular use is actually not agricultural. It's a classification of industrial, which is pharmaceutical.
I'm not
Herbs.
familiar enough in whether they're doing hydroponic or what type of,
It is hydroponic.
it's hydroponic. I do know that, because I do a lot of work down in Leamington and Chatham, and where there's high water use. Those greenhouses that are use good conservation measures, use trying to think what the amount is, 5,200 gallons per day per acre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's down from normally 10,000. So I think if you were looking to consider that maybe like what's an industrial versus a hydroponic, you may find that they, on average, may have a higher water and wastewater use,
Mm-hmm.
which may be why they're categorizing it more in the industrial category. I wouldn't necessarily think that it's, like if you want to look at an impact on a service, they're probably a very high water and wastewater user.
Mm-hmm.
So reducing them further from industrial is more of a policy matter, but if you want to consider it, I wouldn't have chosen that exact, I would have done it the other way. I would have put them in industrial because I would have perceived that their actual use is at an industrial average use, if not higher.
So that
from
would
a
be
service perspective.
all, in that case, all cannabis, whether they're in an agricultural zone or not, they
Well,
would be
they're-
classified industrial.
Sorry, if they're not hooked to the water and the wastewater system, then they're providing their own private services. And then they're only paying for reduced transportation related type of charge. If they're within the service area, then they're being provided with access to treatment capacity, water supply, they have to flow through, they have to be stored, they have pumpage, they have to provide for fire flow. So I'm not familiar enough with cannabis on either side of it, the growing or the use of it. So I'm not quite sure what it is from a comparative. I would, if it's similar to tomatoes and other products, I would then say it's probably a very high use.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's within the urban area, I would deem that probably the industrial categorization would be reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Could we go further then? Because again, I've chaired this committee now for 2 terms, and we deal with usage. We don't deal with the profitability or the lucrative nature of the business. And so can we do a classification where it becomes industrial because it has permanent structures as opposed to greenhouses, which are non-permanent structures? So that becomes defensible as opposed to, they're making a lot of money, so we should make some.
I'm not familiar enough with it, however, I've been involved in some discussions, and I understand that and I may be wrong, but my understanding is that this type of structure is a little bit more,
They're vaults.
yeah, they're a little bit, down in Leamington, I mean, we may end up with plastic over a steel frame. I don't think that will be necessarily the type of structure.
Yeah, you don't have guard dogs on the inside.
I think if.
So I think if we could look at that, it would be much more defensible. I look into Mr. Zagaric in terms of, I mean, at some point, if there's appeals, we have to be able to defend it based on the planning law and the Development Charges Act, not because it's going to be a profitable commodity. So if we could do that, I'd be more comfortable. I can't speak for the committee, but I would be more comfortable. Just regards to the greenhouses and Leamington, have we compared how our greenhouses are being assessed versus Leamington? Are we competitive? Do we know?
I haven't done that analysis, I've got the information.
If we could get that, that would be very helpful, because I've been hearing from a few farmers that charges that they're getting now on greenhouses are getting so much that it's not worth their while to even farm. So let's look at that and make sure that we're not starting to assess them out of the market. Okay? So if we could get a report back on that, Madam Chair. The other question was a question, and I think I raised it last time on special policy areas, special area charges. And I think what's on slide number 20 references the special policy area that was in Glanbrook. And I think the question that I had raised was the discussion about setting development charges. There was a Pamela Blay that appeared before council, and I was reminded by Mr. McLean earlier, and her report indicates that development charges should be higher in the greenfields and in the downtown to encourage that growth, which is in essence what we've been doing with our DC exemptions on SEPA, and now we're phasing it out so that hopefully we get more development. So was that assessed? Have you must have heard of her and her, I mean, I think every city council's heard of her in Ontario, so
We,
please.
Pamela, as part of the, you were familiar that the province was investigating, maybe some refinements to the act and put out questions about the development community and the municipalities, et cetera. We participated in that. At the Monk Center in Toronto, we had a roundtable discussion, which was academia, some of the professors that get into this, including Pamela Blay. There was municipal people, municipal representatives, ourselves, et cetera. And that area did come in, and so, and I think we've talked about this. I mean, at the there's impacts on services, and I don't think you can take away from that. And actually the home builders and the build were confirming from their perspective the implications of intensification does have costs, and maybe in certain instances may be more expensive, maybe, but it comes down to a couple of different things. I mean, the concept is initially if it's redevelopment and you're talking about a redeveloping area and the perspective that the infrastructure is there, so it should be no cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily factual. If you give an engineer a plan and say, here's low-density development and put in pipes, the local pipes in that area are sized like this. If you go and build now a whole bunch of 10-story apartment buildings in that space, and then have them all flush at the same time when they get home at 5 o'clock, you're going to find that the most undesirable floors are the first three, because the system's not going to take it. So we're going to end up with a problem. So it demonstrates that depending on the nature of the developments and such, there will be cost implications. And that's fine. So there's primary, which is rate adjacent. So kind of like when developers build subdivisions, they size the pipes. So within these development areas, if we were having redevelopment, maybe the local services are being paid by the local developments. When you start to look downstream, there's no difference in the cost. They use the water, the treatment facilities, we have to provide the water, we have to provide the storage, sometimes higher storage, depending on the heights and stuff like that. There's pumping capacity, we have to replace pipes. Quite often, there's not a big difference. I think with Pamela Blay's observations, I think where it really comes home, and I certainly don't disagree with her, when you're talking about greenfield and what we've moved to and what the province has moved to over the past 20 years, is a more intense use of greenfield developments. And she's saying, utilize that more, and when you're building the services, you get more utility out of it. I don't disagree, because, to upsize a pipe, to take much more development, it's only a 10% added cost. You're already doing the downstream works, size it for the appropriate capacity. So it works when you're looking at more intense use of greenfield. When you're having to come back into redevelopment areas, you may find that it's far more costly. To put in a pipe in a greenfield area is 3 times the cost, in a redevelopment area, it's 3 times the cost, because you gotta tear out, you gotta break open the road, you gotta tear out the pipe that's there, you gotta put a new pipe in, then you gotta reinstate everything. Generally, it's 2.5 to 3 times the cost to put in a pipe. So there's all these different factors that may not make it cheaper. In fact, in some cases, you may find it's more expensive. And we had that discussion, and as I say, at the end of the day, I think the differentiation, I think where the province is moving to be clearer too in the communication is intensification in greenfield is cheaper, is more cost effective. And as I say, as in Thomas, I don't disagree. Within redevelopment areas, there may be opportunities, maybe the sizing of the pipes are adequate, and it's great. As a fundamental principle, intensify, and there's no cost. I think any engineer around the table or economist can't necessarily buy into it, because it's the individual servicing that's there and what was put in before that you have to measure. So, it's the only way I can describe.
So it could be cost effective
It
if
could
the
be.
ambient neighborhood already had intensified apartments. There'd be
Yeah.
really no change within the system underground. But if it's relatively new redevelopment and you're putting in apartments where it's single-family homes, those pipes may need to be enlarged, which consequently would be an additional cost. Okay. There was one other question, and my mind went blank. All right, I'll take the chair back.
Thank you.
Councilor Pearson.
Mr. Chairman, just going back to the discussion with regards to the industrial charges for the cannabis farming facility. I know you asked about the greenhouse and how our rates are now. Can we also ask staff if they can get data and information on how other communities, I'm sure other communities are addressing this very issue that we are right now.
Yep.
And are they over this as a base in charge?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I know they are, because we're seeing emails coming back and forth. We're all struggling in the same capacity, so let's make sure that we're looking at the comparators.
There's strength in numbers if we're all on the same page. Thank you.
I'd rather be at court with partners than by ourselves. Other questions? Yep.
Just marijuana thing again. Was there some kind of policy or guideline, like would you like to locate these things in the Brownfields areas uptown, right?
Council had indicated that.
Yeah, they didn't, oh, okay.
The planning committee made that recommendation that it would be industrial in brownfields. The challenge is that we really don't have control with the applications. The applications are federal, and the answer to the questions on control for the municipalities is we don't.
Okay.
So that's why we're trying to struggle figuring out how we're going to deal with it in the 2 different areas, rural and our present. We don't want them in residential areas at all. Now there are some that are single homes that had those licenses, but the public generally doesn't know that they exist. They're serving 1 or 2 clients, and that's what the license was for. These are going to be significant.
Yeah, it was just sort of relating to the existing sewerage and wastewater that's there and how that might affect your lease.
Yep. Councilor Johnson?
If I can add to that, one of the main reason why we were hoping it would go into the brownfields is because of the sewer and the water use, because of the voltage that they're going to need, and security. And they're all done in permanent buildings. They're not done in greenhouses per se, because greenhouses are portable and they're not as secure, so that's why they're done in permanent buildings. So it's almost like a different animal, if you will. And so thank you.
Yep. Other questions? I have one question with regards to, and I think I know the answer, but the phasing out of SEPA in the manner that it's being lowered over a period of time. The recommendation on the 5 years and the phasing out and the purpose of doing the phase out.
So through the chair, we considered two options. One was the phase out over the term of the bylaw renewal versus a more immediate adjustment. At senior management team, the discussion and the consensus was phasing out provides the development community who are focused on the downtown area an opportunity to adjust their business plans accordingly. It gives them an opportunity to engage their financial backers and financial institutions and some clear indication as to what the policy changes over the period 2016 to 2019 versus a more immediate adjustment. But again, the focus was to recognizing that there has been some economic uptake in the downtown area, is the fact that the exemption played a role, clearly helped facilitate the uptake, and it was trying to strike a balance between maintaining our financial position, given that the exemptions represent a pressure, and that pressure is transferred onto existing ratepayers, so trying to balance the impact on the existing ratepayers while at the same time trying to facilitate additional development going forward. So we did pursue two options, and the consensus was to phase it out over the term of the bylaw rather than to make a more immediate adjustment. And again, the focus is on trying to strike a balance between facilitating development and at the same time managing our financial risks.
One of the questions, Madam Chair, Council or GIC and planning was, if SEPA becomes a permanent structure, then there's no incentive for developers to move forward with, because it's going to be there for 10, 15 years. If it's being phased out, then if they're wanting to take advantage of it, they have to move their business cases faster. Was that taken into consideration?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. And the discussions around a more immediate versus a phase out was trying to be sensitive to the fact that those who are already in queue in terms of development likely already have their financial support, and we didn't want to compromise that by a more immediate adjustment. But at the same time, as there seems to be some momentum, our downtown staff, economic development, were able to show that, is again, it sends a clear signal to developers that the city is still wanting to facilitate, but at the same time, as there may be an opportunity to forego some of the impacts if they chose to accelerate. For instance, accelerating to 2016, 17 versus 2018.
And there's going to be policy that protects the developers that they have their plans in motion, so that they're not getting hit with a reduction while they're dealing with our process on delays.
Yeah. So through the chair, there are some existing policies. If staff or if part of the process as a result to a delay is an impact by staff, it's at the discretion of the general manager of planning, economic development, and the general manager of finance and corporate services to recommend a deferral in terms of the DC.
Yeah, because it would be kind of inappropriate if we're delaying the process and then they lose the 5% or 10% as a result of our own delays.
And through the chair, we do consider those on occasion.
Okay, I'll take the chair back. Any other questions from anyone here? Okay, and so then we have to, there's no other meetings for this committee? Okay, so generally we try to get some position out of the committee, so I'm hesitant to go down that road because we have the draft here. I know there's additional work to be done, so I'm looking to the committee members in terms of how we want to proceed. In the past, we've secured agreement on the need to increase the DCs, but dispute on the timing, and we made recommendations on delays. There's any number of alternatives before us, but I'm also cognizant that Adam indicated there was a couple of projects that hadn't been incorporated yet. Is that?
The chair, there's projects that are still being reviewed at the request of the Homebuilders Association.
Okay. And how does the addendums work? So the addendums would be attached after the fact, and this committee wouldn't see those addendums and be able to make recommendations on those addendums.
Through the chair, yeah, so any changes that are made after the background study goes to print would require an addendum to outline what those changes are. At this point in time, I know there's a listing of projects the Homebuilders Association have asked us to look at. A lot of the changes and a lot of the projects are smaller in nature, but I mean, we'll have to wait until we look at them in detail to see what sort of a financial impact there might be.
Okay, so to the home builders then, and their representatives, has the process worked in terms of gathering the facts for you, and the analysis is accurate in terms of the quantums that were set out, or are there still issues related to the quantums?
I would say that we're well into the process. We had some issues based on benefit to existing.
Mhm.
We've noted our concerns about the conservation
Yes.
penalty charge. So we are working through that. As Adam said, we're not even to the deadline of submitting projects. So, in my opinion, it's a bit preliminary to make it.
And that's my concern.
So.
We also have, we were given this, local component policies, and the policies that you're including in as appendices to the bylaw, the report to council, and we are still reviewing that. We just got it last week, and that has to be considered as well. So there are still some loose ends we have to tie up, but we are working with staff on getting that done, and hopefully we'll be in good position by the public meeting.
Yes, but that kind of short circuits the process that this committee forms, because there's no recommendation from this committee, which I'm not satisfied with personally. Councilperson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize, I know I told you earlier, unfortunately, I have another meeting yet, so I'll be very brief shortly, and I don't know if you'll lose the forum, and I just wanted to let you know. Is it possible through you to Adam or to Jasmine, actually, can we schedule another meeting? I know it says the proposed bylaws are available to the public May the 6th, but is there somewhere between May the 6th and the 21st that we can have another roundtable with everyone? And then everyone has that information, they can come back with all their, haven't been ironed out yet?
So, Mr. Zagaric, the time, and Jasmine, the timelines to the effective date for the new DC. So we're working backwards from July 6th. And so I'm assuming that June 11th is the council meeting that's required to get that approved, or is that the last council meeting prior to July 6th?
So through the chair, the schedule you have before you, you'll see two council dates. The May 28th assumes GIC recommendations being approved on the May 21st. Alternatively, if there's additional information when the report goes to GIC on May 21st that requires a second GIC on June the 4th, that would then result in the GIC report going to council on June the 11th. In terms of our council dates, I'm not sure if there is a council date. Oh, there is one on June 26th.
Okay, so is it possible then to move the proposed first public meeting to the second date, which would be June the 4th, and that would provide this committee with an opportunity to at least attempt to come up with some recommendations or comments to the GIC.
So through the chair, because of the advertising deadlines, yesterday the ad proofs were approved for the Spectator at Your Service and Hamilton Community newspapers for publication in this Thursday and Friday respectively, papers of the notice of public meeting.
Okay, well, I wasn't advised of that because I would have raised concerns, but anyways, Mr. Zagarek?
Through the chair, one option would be to treat the 21st as the public meeting, is to assume the June 4th as a GIC to deliberate the staff report, take into consideration, and we could look in terms of consulting with our consultants to see whether or not there's an opportunity to strike the subcommittee.
We're having a public meeting without a report coming from this body, which is contrary to everything that we've set forth in terms of policy and engaging the community. So I understand the public meeting. I'm disappointed that there's an admin placed that I wasn't consulted on because I would have raised the concern that we're not going to be ready. And we built into this timeline that additional space. So I'm not sure how we're going to resolve that, but this committee's, it has to have that opportunity to make a recommendation. Otherwise, we've just wasted our entire time here. Staff could have met with home builders and the heck with the citizens and everyone else and all the work that we've done because there's no recommendation coming out of us. And that's not satisfactory. Councillor Pearson.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but just for the process here is, Jasmine, if I leave, you lose quorum.
Nope, we don't.
You do not lose?
Nope.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I apologize.
I understand. Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, just out of interest, is those unresolved issues that are going between staff and the home builders, are they at so opposite ends of the string that this will take years to resolve, or can this be resolved before May 6th? I'm just throwing it out there. Is it that bad that we'll never see a resolution in the near future, or can we get something that's gonna make sure by the 6th it's ready to go?
We may have two disputes between where they are, and this committee ultimately has to make a recommendation. That's what we've done in the past. And that's my point. They do their best to come to an agreement. We already know that conservation areas is being appealed in Halton, and you've raised a similar concern, although the amount of that DC on conservation is not as significant as it is in Halton, but it's the principle of the DC that you've raised the concern, and I completely respect that concern. So we know that's outstanding. The other projects have to be incorporated, and it's simply the process.
And it's really just a matter of time. I mean, the deadline for submitting projects isn't until the end of today, and then you start discussing them, so.
I see. That's what I wanted to get to an idea of. Is this an easy fix, or is this something that's gonna take forever in the day and totally screws up the process?
It's really just a matter of process. We've been meeting every week to go through the projects, and we're just.
In my mind, 2 weeks from now, we may be able to have another meeting of this committee and actually look at what we have, and then have that opportunity to fulfill our mandate, which was to provide advice to the planning committee and council, in this case GIC. Mr. Zagarek.
Just in terms of recognizing that there may be opportunities to meet with the stakeholders and come to some form of consensus. Another option is we can amend the public notice to advertise a June 4th public meeting. That would provide the opportunity for further consultation in the interest of arriving at some form of consensus at the stakeholders. So we can work with clerks to produce another public notice revising that.
And I think that would be the preferable option for everyone. This is supposed to be a credible process, and it has been up till now. I don't want to see it tarnished simply because we go to a public meeting without a recommendation. That could be a very long public meeting, and we really do help if we have some form of recommendation that the GIC can concentrate on. So, Mr. Zagarek, Madam Clerk, can you make that so?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Please. Any other questions of the committee? Thank you for everyone's involvement. I sincerely appreciate it. We need a motion to adjourn, moved by, and we need a citizen member to second it. Thank you. And all in favor? We're carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.